Yeah. It is the worst produced show on the internet, and it's a reputation that we struggle to maintain. I don't want anybody to think that just because we're in a new studio doesn't mean that we don't have a reputation to maintain, and that reputation is intact because if we don't lead off with a terrible error that either blows out your hearing or the internet, then my name's not Bill Whittle, and this isn't the Stratosphere Lounge. Episode 88, coming to you live from the Stratosphere Lounge, although, as you can probably tell, not coming to you from the studio because our Astro Girl Desiree Gabrielle is down in San Diego with a friend and a cousin who's heading off to the Navy, so that's pretty cool. But we do have the second camera for those of you who are interested in seeing what's going on here in the magic of the Stratosphere Lounge. You can just take a look at this awesomeness. Ready? Here we go. Check it out. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know what that question mark in the dissolve was for, but here we are. We got our James T. Kirk. We got our Gorn Captain. We got the stage where we normally shoot the show. We have a second angle. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't like watching the close-up, there's always the wide shot. It tones it down. But, a lot of people said the nice thing about going back to the close-up on the shot is it reminds us of the olden days, and that question mark is just going to drive me out of my mind. It's going to drive me out of my mind. Well, like I say, reputations. So, it's good to be here, good to be back. We have done a lot since last we spoke. We did Speakeasy, which was a lot of fun. We got a lot to talk about with that. Tell you a little bit about the update for that charity thing that we did before we got into the questions. Got some fun questions tonight. And before we go on, I'm going to... as many of you know, the show is live, and we stream to YouTube, and we might get 4,000 views on YouTube, but 150 people watch, 200 people watch live. So here's the fun thing about watching live. If you watch live, you get to interact on the little live stream here. You can type in your comments, and I get to see them. There's about a delay of about 15, 20 seconds, something like that. But it's always fun to interact with the live stream. So here's what we're going to do. I've got just a really big, gigantic, fun announcement to make, but we're gonna sneak it in. We're gonna do it slowly. We're not gonna give anybody too much because that's not how you do the show thing, right? Showmanship is showmanship. So showmanship works like this. So here's the slow reveal. We have a guest in the studio audience. Person means a whole lot to me. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Let you try to figure it out. I'm going to give you one hint. I'll probably reveal more next week, if not the actual true identity. But here's the hint. Her stepfather was in the Billionaire Boys Club. And if you can deduce from there who our special mystery guest is, then you win a bumper sticker. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sit here and wait till somebody figures out who it is, because the first name I see up there is going to be a bumper sticker. And if I say your name, I need you to write to info@billwhittle.com and say that you won the bumper sticker. So as the delay comes up and down before we get into this, I'm going to watch here. Going to watch. Here we go. It's going to be a second. It's going to be kind of fun, kind of cool. I got a really smart crowd. These people figure out all kinds of cool things. You get a thorium reactor in here by the time the show is done if I really put people on the job. Hey, let's go to the wide shot again. You want it? I kind of do. It's questionable. The wide shot is questionable. Guesses are coming in. It's not Andrew Clavin, because Andrew Clavin is not a friend of mine and he wouldn't belong here. Andrew Clavin is, as you know, the source of all evil in the world. I can see it. It's so awesome because right now I know people are Googling and they're checking their iPads. People are. I'm telling you, we got close. Somebody got close. Somebody got very close, but no cigar. Oh boy. Nope. Oh, somebody got so close. Hang on, we're waiting for the big bell. I can't move on. I can't take my eyes off the screen because if I do, somebody's gonna lose their chance. It's not Judd Nelson. No, it's not Judd Nelson. I don't want to stretch this out too long. I might have to just go right into the question period as just keep my glance over there. And it's not Lyda Loudon. Somebody was within 2 letters. But as on Jeopardy, we have to stick to the actual correct answer. We can't fudge a little bit. I know this is probably not great TV for those of you who are out there watching on YouTube. You know what? I'm going to just get on with it. Let me just tell you a little bit about this Tawny fundraiser thing, and if I see the name, I'll just jump right back out. As you know, I put in a request for some help for a friend of a friend named Tawny, who's really in terminal stage of cancer and is really in very bad shape. And I did it about as much as I could to help her, and then I put up the post. And for those of you who saw the post, I just want to tell you this. I mentioned in the post that Tawny, who is suffering from this terminal cancer, is not going to get out of this, and she's not going to have any cavalry ride to the rescue. And within 2 hours, I think, of the post going up, we'd raised $5,000. They sat there in the room, in the bed, because their bed's in a bedroom. She just sat there in the room with the iPad, looking at the totals go up. And then I got a text saying it's been about 2 hours. We've raised $5,000. And she said, turns out there is, in fact, cavalry out there. And the cavalry is you guys. So if you're close to that, and if you were able to help, I can't tell you how much it means to me. I can't tell you how much it means to her. I can't tell you how much it means to the whole idea of voluntary charity. But I just want all of you to know that you made a terminally ill mom cry. Made her cry from gratitude and joy and thanks. And I have a feeling we might do a little video from her and put it up there. And for those of you that helped, it's amazing. $5, what $5 will do. But what I really want to do is just say it's the quality of the people that make all of this possible. It's the reason I get out of bed. It's the reason I do the show. It's the reason I do everything. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. And all of you checking in here, I see a bunch of you actually contributed $10. The $10 adds up. And hey, it's Deborah Kerwin-Peck. Deborah, you win the prize, and you, if you can send an email to info@billwhittle.com, you will get your bumper sticker, and I'll sign a DVD for you too. But I can't get your name because I don't have your email address, and so there you go. All right. There, somebody figured it out. I knew it wouldn't happen. I knew it would happen. I knew it. And now we're going to get comments all night. In any event, back to Tawny. She really did genuinely sit there for 2 hours and watch the totals come up. And her family came and watched the totals come up, and she just sat there crying and couldn't believe it. And I knew in 2003, when I first started doing eject, and I'd start hearing emails and comments from all of you good people, just became... Eisenfuhrer said it first. Well, Eisenfire we'll send him out to both, because Eisenfire... did he get the name right? I missed it. In any event, Eisenfire is a good friend of mine, and I will send him a car or something. But Deborah, since I said so, I don't want to disappoint anybody, so go ahead and do that anyway. In any event, it meant an awful lot to her, meant an awful lot to me. And when I was doing this in 2003, I realized that the quality of the people who are attracted to this work and these ideas are not only the most extraordinary people I've ever met, but they make me a better person. I have to be a better person. I'm a much better person than I was before I started doing this, because you have to rise to the standard of your audience. And I've never felt it more strongly than I did after that. So $5, $10 more, whatever those of you gave. And I'll tell you something else too. I know that those of you who didn't because you couldn't. I know times are tough out there, and I just never cease to be amazed at the quality of this group, and that's why it's such a pleasure to do a show, especially a show like this one-on-one, where you get to talk directly, and I get to thank you directly for everything you've done. So it's been tremendous. So just a quick before we go on, now that we have the mystery guest pre-identified, we can tell you a little bit about Speakeasy. We did Speakeasy in North Hollywood back on the 19th, so been a little over a week. And we're just getting the thing together and getting it edited. We have, as a matter of fact, been doing time over targets once a day for 3 weeks now, and that's something I'm pretty proud of because, as we've talked about, there's build time, which is geological time. Build time is sometime, it's a little bit quicker than geological time, but it's certainly slower than real time, and we got this studio finished in build time, but it's done. We got time over target up, which I'd been talking about for about, 6 months, but it's done. We got Speakeasy shot, which we've been talking about for about 5 months, and it's done. And we'll start getting those Speakeasy comments up, and we'll do a little sizzle reel and put that out in public. But they're getting done, which means that we can now move on to the next step. Once Speakeasy is up online, that will be the official end of my short-term plans. And we can move into the midterm plans, which is a movie a year for 3 years, as you well know. And I'm real inspired to get that done, too. It's great to be hanging out with somebody who I can talk movies with and gives me all kinds of insights into, don't you look at me, into movies and art and drama and things like that. It's fun. So that's that, and it's time to move on and get into some questions, and we got a bunch of great ones. For Stratosphere Lounge 88, so that's 88 shows, and there are probably a couple, I know we did at least a couple that didn't get recorded because some idiot forgot to hit the record button, and if I ever find that guy, he's going to get in a lot of trouble. But anyway, 88, and so we're going to do some gigantic 100th episode. We should just do like 5 a week, 1 a day until we get to 100 because it's really cool. Anyway, let's get going because we got a lot of ground to cover here, and we might as well start with our friend Michael Hanna. Michael, it's good to see you again. Good to see this question is half a novel, but it's interesting. So here we roll, and ready, here we go. And thank you for that. I just saw Overload Ed just said time over target got me to join BillWhittle.com. Thank you, Ed, and we appreciate it. And that's the idea. So that makes me actually very happy. Anyway, here we go with Michael Hanna. Question number 1 for Stratosphere Lounge 88. Bill, I was speaking with a self-described libertarian one day, and in bringing you up, he said he has a lot to agree with you on except the interventionist BS. When I asked him to elaborate on his beliefs, he made probably one of the best isolationist arguments I've ever heard, something to the effect of, you conservatives think everyone ought to be left alone to care for themselves, but when it comes to foreign affairs, you want to come to everyone else's aid. Seems very interesting because the countries we saved in World War II, France, for example, do indeed act like entitled brats, filled with loathing whilst dependent on the provision of what might be called our world security welfare system. Like the destructiveness of welfare and foreign aid dependency, does hawkish policy around the globe make sheep out of people who might otherwise become sheepdogs out of necessity? Great questions. All right, so there's 2 things here. That's a real 2-part question, so let's deal with them part by part. The interventionist BS that I believe so strongly in is 2-part BS. The first part of the BS that I believe in is the idea that we are not in a world where invasion is going to be determined by fleets of bombers or giant fleets of battleships. We don't get to have 10 years or 12 years or 15 years watching Japan construct giant fleets of battleships and the Yamato being constructed in 14 aircraft carriers. We don't have that luxury anymore. Those days are over. One of the things that I believe very strongly from studying human history is that conflict is inevitable. Humans are as prevalent as we are. We're by far the largest large mammal population in the world, and we're going to get larger. The reason we've been so successful is because we're so adaptable. We eat everything, for instance. There's not anything on this earth that humans don't eat. We eat virtually every plant. We eat insects, bugs, fish, birds. We eat everything. And we're adaptable to any environment. You can find humans in the desert. You can find us at the poles. You can find us in between. The fastest animal on the earth is a human. The deepest diving animal on the earth is a human. So on and so on and so on. So the reason we're able to do all these things is because we're extremely adaptable. We're basically programming machines. We're biological creatures that can take a program and go with it. Which means that if you grow up in the desert, you might eventually have a conflict with people who grow up in the snow, and that means that if both people are taking their disagreements pretty seriously, sooner or later it's going to come down to a fight. Now, I wish that weren't true. It'd be nice if it weren't true. I'd love to believe it weren't true. I've never seen any evidence of any time in history where it wasn't true, and I don't see human matter, this stuff, changing anytime soon. So, if you accept that conflict is inevitable, I don't think there's any way that you can avoid that premise. You just can't. You can't look at history, and you just can't. You can't look at it. And by the way, it's not just us, these horrible killer apes. It's not like just humans are these war apes, these murdering machines. Chimpanzees form war bands and fight other chimpanzees. If a wolf pack comes into another wolf pack's territory, that there's going to be fewer wolves. It's not just us. It's not just bacteria do this. So it's part of biology, this conflict. And so if you accept that conflict's inevitable, and I don't see how you read any kind of history and not come to that conclusion, then you come to two other conclusions. One of them is, if we're going to fight them, I'd rather fight them at the time of my choosing rather than the time of their choosing. And the second thing is, if we got to fight them, I'd rather fight them over there than fight them here. I don't know why this is so hard to understand. The interventionalist BS that I believe in is pretty simple, and it's predicated on some fundamental beliefs. We're going to have to fight somebody sometime. I'd rather fight them when we want to rather than when they want to, and I'd rather fight them over there than over here, because when bombs go off, you don't just hit the things you're aiming the bombs at. So it's pretty simple, really. So then the question becomes, when does this interventionalist BS become critical? Now the libertarians have an argument they can make. Now you can start making an argument about all the places and times that we shouldn't have been places and times, but you can't make an argument that we should never have been. You can't make the argument that isolationism didn't do anything but get us into World War II. Isolationism meant that when World War II started, we had the 32nd largest army in the world after Portugal. Isolationism meant that we were completely unprepared for what we had been seeing with our own eyes for 20 years. And sticking our heads in the sand and telling ourselves that it's not our problem because there's an ocean between us and them didn't do us much good in the end, really, did it? So when it gets down to the BS, maybe it's not the interventionalist position that's the BS. Maybe it's the isolationist position that's the BS, because I look at the history of the world, and I've seen the price of isolationism. There's a form of isolationism on September 10th of 2001. Bill Clinton had a chance to take out bin Laden, I think on a golf course, believe it or not. And Susan Rice said, "Don't do it. You might get sued." So he didn't. And now there's 3,000 fewer people, and the skyline in Manhattan looks different. So I'll get to the welfare aspect of it in a minute. But from a purely granite foundation position of why I'm a hawk, it's not that I'm a hawk because I like to kill people. It's not like I'm a hawk because I like to see conflict. I think war is awful, and I think war sucks, and I think it's the worst thing there is. And I, as much as anybody else, would like to see a world without war or conflict. I really would. But just because I wish I could see that doesn't mean I'm going to see it. So if there's going to be fighting, I want to be good at fighting. And if we're going to be fighting for our civilization, I want our fighters to be the best fighters there are. And I want to be prepared to go anywhere at any moment and knock the crap out of the people who want to come over here and kill our kids and take away our freedom. It's not so hard to figure out. And it's the libertarian position that doesn't hold water on this one, I'm sorry to say. The libertarian's position on just about everything else I'm with, but not on this one. Because there's no evidence that the libertarian position on this one is going to get you anything other than a bloody nose. And then you're going to have to fight anyway. And when you fight anyway, then you're going to have to fight unprepared. I don't want to fight unprepared. I want to be ready to kick some ass at the beginning. So that's the interventionist argument in terms of defense. Now you get to the interesting one about welfare. That's a better argument. So basically the second half of the question was the idea that, okay, so we went over there and bailed out France in World War II. And France, as an example, then basically set up a giant socialist state, and over the course of time the French Defense Forces got so weak and so small that they can have their socialism because the American taxpayers pay for the defense of Europe. And that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. We pay for the defense. The reason they have that Norway and Sweden have big socialist utopias where there's cradle-to-grave benefits is because they can afford it, because A, they're bringing in guest workers that's not working out so well for them, and B, they can afford it because they don't have to pay for defense, and they don't have to pay for defense because we pay for their defense. And I think it was Loch Ness Socialism where I basically said, you get to be socialist because the capitalists are defending you from the bad socialists, namely the Russians who have already shown Finland how they feel about Finnish borders and things of that nature. So The question is, do you develop dependency? And I suppose, on some level, Michael, you do. But I mean, what's the alternative, right? What's the alternative to not rescuing France in World War II? What's the alternative to not getting involved in World War II? I don't like a world where Hitler is running unchallenged around the world. I don't like a world where Stalin is running around unchallenged around the world. And really, the more you get into the history of these people, once you understand what life was like for people who had to live under those systems, it's very hard not to want to get up there and knock them in the teeth. Which brings us to the final point here, and that is, okay, if you're going to believe in this interventionist BS, where do you use it? Under what conditions do you use it? And for me, it's pretty straightforward. It was nice doing the virtual presidency thing because it kind of forced you to think a little more clearly about these things and present these ideas in a better way, something that was intelligible. So the reason, when you're going to intervene, if you're going to intervene, you've got to have a pretty good reason for it, because I agree with this idea of not intervening everywhere. Certainly I agree with that. It's not our job to go and bring freedom to people who don't want freedom. It's not our job to fight other people's revolutions or to give them the gift that we had to earn for ourselves, because then it means nothing to them. But with all that said, I think you can make the case for intervention, military intervention, on fundamental grounds. Here's the nice thing about having a consistent philosophy. When you don't know how to answer a question, you can always go back to your philosophy, and your philosophy is consistent, then the philosophy gives you an answer. So here's my answer. I believe in freedom. I believe the United States is the bastion of freedom and individuality on earth. I think we were invented so that individual people could live free, period. So that's the national interest of the United States. Anything that we do that protects the freedom of American citizens to continue to be free is something that we ought to think about very seriously getting engaged in. Now, the nice thing about living in this country and having been surrounded by hawks my entire life, pro-military people my entire life, I've never once heard one of them say, we need to go conquer this country because we need their oil or we need their land or we want it because it's a nice tropical paradise. Nice thing about having the best real estate on earth is you don't covet anybody else's real estate because it's crap. I mean, seriously. Do I need to invade Honduras because I need Honduran territory? No, not when there's Colorado, I don't. I don't need to invade the Sahara. I sure as hell don't need to invade, living hellholes like Iraq and all that other stuff. There's nobody I've ever met who's a hawk who is a hawk because they want to take somebody else's territory or stuff. They're hawks because they want to protect our stuff. So if you find people who are making plans to kill our people and take away our freedom, then I'd rather fight those people at my choosing and not theirs, and I'd rather fight them over there than over here. And that's why I believe in this stuff. And to the degree that it makes people dependent on us, that is a problem. And that's a problem that should be addressed politically. Like, guess what, France? We're not going to cover your defense bill. We're not going to cover your defense bill either, Germany. You're going to have to cover your own defense bill. We'll help. And we'll be the tripwire, and we'll be behind you. I think probably Korea is a pretty good example of that. I mean, South Korea is no slouch when it comes to their military forces. Whether or not they could stop North Korea by themselves, I suspect they probably couldn't. But I think that's really where we belong in terms of a defensive posture, as a tripwire. You put American troops with our allies, and if these Russian alcoholic murderers, good enough for me, decide they're going to barge into the Ukraine, they're going to have to kill a couple of American troops to do it, and then there are going to be consequences. As far as the dependency thing goes, then I think just politically, just say, well, don't let them. We let them. We just assume there's no consequences to these things, but there are. And so, yes, to answer your question, to wrap it up, Michael, it's true. We bail out France, and what we get in exchange for that is we get their contempt. Strange, isn't it, though, that we get the contempt out of our allies, but the people who we actually defeated and then bailed out, Germany and Japan, are superb friends of the United States. They're the ones who took the hit. And when, as we've said many times before, there's only one, looking at the laboratory of history, there's only one certain proven recipe for turning an enemy into a friend, and that is you've got to destroy them, utterly destroy them, kill all their warriors, destroy their fire eaters, completely destroy them, put them on their knees to the point where they think they're going to be your slaves. And once they're utterly defeated, and they're sure they're defeated, and they would rather be defeated than continue fighting, once they're down and done, if you help them to their feet, then they will be your friends forever. And if you try to help them to their feet before you defeat them, that doesn't work. And if you just defeat them and leave them down, that doesn't work. But there is a method, and it does seem to work. So that's my answer. And I'd love to be an isolationist. It's just it hasn't paid off in the past, and it's a more dangerous world than it used to be. So hopefully that helped a little, Michael. Moving on, Cheryl Twomey says, here we go. I don't get to read these often before the show. I just kind of grab them and print them and cut and paste them. So, but I knew this one was going to be fun. Cheryl Twomey says, if you were hired as a consultant to Gene Roddenberry when he was developing Star Trek: The Next Generation, how would you have changed the characters in the Federation so they would reflect less of a leftist philosophy in favor of the Kirk-era philosophy? And speaking of the Kirk-era philosophy, it's probably time for a wide shot. Would perpetually pain-feeling Troy have been the first cut? Yes, actually, having an attorney on the bridge and a therapist on the bridge. You know, they got the captain, and you've got the first officer, and you've got your therapist on the bridge. Yeah, that would have been the first thing that went. First of all, I would have made those two positions science officer and weapon officer, and I would have put them behind me so they don't get in my way, because I'm the captain, and I don't need somebody sitting next to me to ask opinions on. I don't, the Next Generation, I just had to show you the Gorn, I had to show you, Jimmy T back there and various enterprises, and so just so we know that we're dealing with a guy who's spent far too much time thinking about these kind of things, far too much time. Question mark in the Mysterian. So how would you change it? Well, the first thing you would do, right? I mean, if I was given the Next Generation, the first thing I would do is I would de-wussify it pretty hard. I mean, it's like, this guy who did the incredible Star Wars reviews, the guy who does the Plinkett reviews on Red State Media, took a look at the first 3 or 4 minutes of A New Hope, the original Star Wars. I don't know why we have to go and try and count out, was episode 4, whatever. Star Wars, the real Star Wars. The first 4 minutes of that versus the first 4 minutes of Phantom Menace. And he runs them side by side. And I know I'm crossing the streams here, and you're never supposed to cross the streams when you talk about Star Trek and Star Wars at the same time, but just stay with me here for a second. What he basically did was he showed the first frames of the original Star Wars and the first frames of Phantom Menace side by side. And in the original Star Wars, the first thing you see is a tiny little ship running away, and it's little, and it's small, and it's powerless, and it's being pursued by this giant delta. And as the little ship runs away, this giant Star Destroyer comes over the camera, and since it's a wedge, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it fills the entire sky. And then the next thing you know, you've got humans who are nervous and scared looking, and they're fighting, and they're getting into position in the corridors, and the hull is breached, and these guys in white plastic stormtroopers come in, and they look like skeletons. They're supposed to look like skeletons. They've got the skull of a skeleton, the eyes of a skeleton. They're skeletons. White skeletons walk in. They're death creatures. You can't kill them because they're already skeletons. And then right behind him in comes a 7-foot-tall, guy with a black robe and a Nazi helmet, and his face is a plastic skull, and it's like, I think that might be the bad guy. And instantly, you're in it, and you're there. There's danger, and there's adventure, and there's excitement, and there's all these other things. And contrasting it with the Phantom Menace, the first thing you see are, as he said, it's a ship that looks like a donut with a bite taken out of it and the donut hole in the middle, and you got these two guys in robes, and they sit down and they drink tea, for God's sakes. I mean, this is the beginning of Star Wars, the opening scenes of Star Wars, and you got these two Jedi Knights sitting there drinking tea, talking about Trade Federation disputes, and it's like, well, what the hell is this anyway? Is this Star Wars, or is this star politics? It's like, it's like star bureaucracy, or it's appalling. It's awful. It's just dull. And it's the same thing with Next Generation. Next Generation is just dull. It's dull because it's all talk. It's all, Counselor Troy, well, I sense much hostility on the enemy bridge. Well, no kidding. They're launching photon torpedoes at us. What gave you the brilliant breakthrough, Deanna, that they're hostile? Was it the fact that they're trying to cut our hole open with energy weapons? Is that what gave it away to you? You genius, you? It's pathetic. It's pathetic from start to finish. So I'll just go down the list. Let's just go down the list. Let's start with the Enterprise. The Enterprise D, I know some people are going to have a little fit about this, but you're wrong. The Enterprise D is a pathetic-looking vehicle. It's all big head, and its hind section is this big. It looks like it needs to drag itself through space with a little rollers underneath the back. It's just this pathetic-looking thing that's just all head and no muscle, no legs, nothing. It's just a gross, fat, stupid, slow, bulbous junk pile. And yeah, it's awful. It's awful. And that's all you need to know about the series, right? I mean, there's no power in that ship. The little warp drive things are down there real low and they're real compact, and it's all about the big head and the little tiny little legs. It's like, don't get me started. So anyway, so you start with the ship. The ship's crap, and it looks like crap, and it's big. And the very first, nobody remembers this, but the pilot episode, Encounter at Farpoint, there's kids on board. There's kids. There's little kids going through the hallway. It's not just an Enterprise. It's a village. It's a space village. Look, they've got kids. Awesome. That's great. They'll be the first ones sucked out into space because a small hole will emit a child, but an adult will get stuck there. So the great thing about having kids on board a fighting warship, the flagship of the Federation, is that the kids can get sucked out of smaller holes than people can. So they make more space debris. I mean, why the hell do you have kids on board the Enterprise? What is he trying to say? I mean, what is Roddenberry trying to say when in the very first cut of the very first scene of the first time you're on board his new Enterprise, you see kids in the hall? Honestly, it's just, what? He's kind of, that's all you really need to know, right? I mean, really, I've never really thought this through before. It's kind of in real time for me, but as I try to avoid thinking about Next Generation if I can help it. But basically, what he's basically saying is that this is a village. And it's nice, and I've got and I'm the captain, but just because I'm the captain doesn't mean I make the decisions, heaven forbid. I've got my first officer here that I can bounce ideas off of and see if everything is copacetic, and over here I've got this lawyer, psychologist, counselor, in case I need, the emotional kind of input, like, I sense much hostility on the enemy bridge. Really? No. Go collect your paycheck. What do you say? What do you say about that? It's so nice. It's so fun. And that's why it's not Star Trek, right? That's why it's not Star Trek. Because you know that it's all about politics. And sure enough, they gave you a federation where you don't discover new stuff. It's like you go from one place to another and you don't interfere. And you don't, and everything's a moral and ethical dilemma. And it's no action, and it's no discovery, and it's nowhere where no man has gone before. It's just we're going over here to settle a dispute between the Bajorans and the Cardassians. Oh, okay. Do we have a side here? Do we care? Not really, no. We can see anything we haven't seen before? No, that's pretty much all explored. Really? Yeah, it's pretty much all explored. Kind of like Sherman Oaks then, is it? Yeah, we know where all the streets are, and we've all been there, and we've all been to Starbase 63, and we all know where everything is doing, and, great. So fantastic. Now, Precious Snowflakes in the comment section says that military families do have kids, Bill. Correct, Precious Snowflake, they do. But they're not on board the aircraft carrier, right? The children of the Navy personnel that serve on the Nimitz aren't on board the Nimitz. And you know why they're not on board the Nimitz? Because the Nimitz might be attacked. And if the Nimitz is attacked, the kids are going to go down with the ship. We don't want the kids on the warship. We want the warship to protect the kids who are back home. And that's a perfect example. Of course, military families have kids. They don't go deploy. You don't put the kids in the lap of the B-2, and you don't have a child safety seat in the back of an F-16 when you're on a SAM suppression mission, because you want to kind of keep the kids safe. This is entirely my point. So, anyway, so you got this whole kind of federation where there's nothing new, and there's nothing new. I mean, how are you gonna walk into a rock creature when everybody's been everywhere before? That was the great thing about the original series, is where no man has gone before. What's this? Well, we've never seen this before. Everything's like, yeah, of course we haven't seen this before. So that's the second problem. And then now let's just get into the characters. The captain of the Enterprise is going to be French. Okay. I'm just going to take a little break, and I'm just going to try and heal for a second. Just going to try and heal. I'm going to try and find a way to get over the shame of it. I just can't believe what I just said. I mean, he's French, and can it get worse? It can. Yeah, he's French, but we're going to give him one of these we're going to give him one of these. What's the word? Is it Tony? Kind of a Tony British accent. He's so much better than everyone else. It's like I'm Captain Picard, and I always do the right thing. It's like, you know what? I don't believe that you could open a jackknife if you really want to know. I believe you could argue with a jackknife, but I don't think you could open one. I don't believe you could use one. And it was like late in the thing where they have to invent something like the Picard maneuver. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. Give him a little badge he can wear as Picard maneuver. Every freaking week, Captain Kirk comes up with a maneuver that's never been done before. Oh, you have the Picard maneuver. Oh, yeah, whatever. It's weak. He's weak. He's a weak character. He's prissy and he's formal and Kirk's on shore leave. He goes down and drinks Romulan ale, and there's Orion slave girls dancing in front of him, and he's drinking Romulan ale, and he's getting lit because he's freaking God. He's a 33-year-old God. He's got all the power of humanity and technology and science behind him. And the guy, when you're done commanding that kind of power, you kind of want to go down and go to a strip club and watch some green alien chick dance in front of you, and you want to get blasted on Romulan ale. That's what men do. They don't sit around and sip Earl Grey tea hot and sit there with their archaeological treasures and have, these kind of platonic relationships with 65-year-old doctors of archaeology that he may have met back in London back 30 years ago. And, it's like, come on. Honestly, this is like, I can see this at the dentist's office, this kind of adventure. I can see this at the dentist's office. This is not something I have to watch science fiction for, to see an old, bald man kind of sipping his Earl Grey tea hot and having a high-level conversation with some doctor that he once had a thing for. And it's like, come on, give me something. I want some ray guns. I want some action. The only character on Next Generation that I liked a little was Riker, because Riker at least looked like he could have been on the original series. Riker could have been on the original Enterprise. They wouldn't have airlocked him. They wouldn't have spaced him, wouldn't have chucked him in the airlock, knocked him on the head, put him in the airlock, blown him out into space. Oops, terrible accident on Deck 3. Riker was the only guy on Next Generation who looked like he was kind of fun. He was kind of a rogue. He's got a little thing going, he's kind of got the babes lined up, and he's not a baby, and he looks like a relatively competent guy. But the rest of them are just, I kind of like Data, okay, I guess, but it's like, okay, he's Pinocchio. He wants to be a real boy. Got it. Got it. It's like, I don't know. Just go on. But the main thing about the Next Generation, really, and I've said it many times, and this is really what you can put the whole thing in a nutshell. And I did. I've done it several times. And here it is. Ready? James T. Kirk made the Federation safe for Jean-Luc Picard. It's just that simple. Kirk was out there shooting lizard-headed computers and dealing with Andromedans that could turn you into a little cube of like laundry detergent, and he was out there killing Klingons because they deserved it, and all this other stuff, and here this is the point. You saw it several times. If Kirk went and took the original Enterprise to a planet where humans were enslaved by a robot, or enslaved by something or other, or enslaved by this, or enslaved by that, if he saw humans enslaved and dependent, Kirk would turn the phasers on that thing, and he'd burn that down to the ground, and they'd say, how are we going to live? Well, it's not our problem, but you're going to live. Remember this? How many times that happened? There's the giant, what was it? It might have been the apple. I always get that mixed up with the one where everybody's going like this, the one with the ball, the giant reptile-headed computer, and everybody is happy, and everybody's lovely, and all they do is love each other, and nobody gets old, and nobody gets sick, and all they do all their entire lives is sit and live happy lives of 4-year-old children and shovel, leaves into Ball so that Ball can continue to exist, and Ball controls the weather, and everything's calm and nice, and everything's groovy and cool, and nobody fights, and everything's fantastic. And Kirk beams down to this planet, and he sees all these people living like 4-year-olds, and he says, Ball has made these people into children. They're dependent on the government, basically, is what Kirk says. And he says, that ain't right. And he just puts the phasers on Ball and vaporizes it. And then it's like, now what do we do? Now you're going to have to figure out how to live like adults. And And off he goes. He doesn't stick around. He doesn't, probably doesn't even get a Christmas card from him. He's just gone. And he does it again. I used to have all these episodes memorized. There was one where the two cultures are they're in war. They've been at war for hundreds of years. And so since they've been at war for hundreds of years, why blow up buildings and destroy buildings with actual bombs? Why not just have computers run simulations of a simulated attack, simulated defense, calculate the casualties, and people just walk into the disintegration booth, and it's stable, and the societies have been doing this for 200 years, and everything's stable, and everything's cool, and Kirk comes in here and says, it's an abomination. He said, war is bloody. If you guys are at war and you're killing each other, then let's see some blood. And if you're not ready to see some blood, maybe you guys could make peace. Blows up these computers, blows up these incinerating things, and boom, gone. So he's interfering on, it's Val, not Baal. Baal is a Babylonian god. Yeah, thank you, Mike. But in any event, right? So he's intervening. Taste of Armageddon. See, I knew Dave Big Boutte. In any event, you get the idea, right? He sees humans dependent and weak, and he goes in there and busts it up. Then he leaves. Picard, on the other hand, the whole movie, one of those god-awful movies, Insurrection or something, is all about we can't interfere. Really? No. You see, that's how we prove our moral superiority, by not interfering. Yes, well, these humans are being enslaved, and yes, they're being tortured, yes, they're being murdered, yes, but we're not going to interfere, you see, because we're so much more morally advanced than the people that are being killed. So we're not going to interfere, and that's how we're going to show everybody how morally superior we are. We're going to show them how morally superior we are by showing them that we're not morally superior to them. Pretty much that's the deal, right? Who are we to say that a society where people live lives is better than one that treats them as herd animals? Who are we to say? Who are we to say? That's why we have the Prime Directive. Who are we to say? Kirk says, I'm saying it's wrong, and it is, so to hell with you. Fire me if you want to. It's really that simple. I don't know what happened to Roddenberry's brain. He just turned into mush, but, yeah, I don't know. I would have basically, if I'd had the next generation, I would have recast, if the predication was that you cannot just basically restart the original series, I would have basically kept everything that I liked, and I would have put them on a slightly bigger, certainly tougher and more powerful ship, and I would have turned everything up to 11. I wouldn't have turned it down to 2. I would have had everybody be a little more badass, and that would have been the end of that. And that show would have been like, yeah, right, that's cool. Nobody asked me, though. That was their critical mistake. Eric Wright wants to know, did you get a chance to see Interstellar? And if so, what are your thoughts on the film? Eric, Interstellar is one of those movies that I was looking forward to so much. I was looking forward to it like Prometheus. And like Prometheus, I came out of there and I just kind of went, meh. I know some people liked it. I saw in some comments, people thought it was just one of the greatest sci-fi films ever. I didn't dislike it. I just was like, eh. And it's like, it's all about the immortality and this and okay. The only part about it I actually liked quite a lot was I liked the dimensional library, the multidimensional library. That was cool. That was really cool. Gave you a sense of what multidimensional worlds were like, and I've been studying this quite a lot lately. So when he was in the library was neat. Coming back to be the... having him be the source that caused him to go off and do something in the first place is this kind of closed time loop that people say are impossible, but they're only impossible if you've got little human brains, The universe is looking more and more mathematically, and I love this. I've mentioned it several times on the show and elsewhere. If you want to see something to really, really, really change the way you view everything, is go to YouTube and look for the original version of Imagining the 10th Dimension. It's by a really brilliant mathematician. And I say brilliant, he's brilliant. He's got a very interesting kind of a voice. He's very kind of low-key. He's not real dynamic, but he's got a really interesting accent, and he's got an incredible ability to explain high-level dimensions in mathematics. And if you go see Imagining the 10th Dimension, I saw it, as I've said before, first time I saw it, I felt like my dog watching TV of brain surgery. It's like, is that a face? Is that a hand? I could catch just little bits of it, little bits of it. But I watched it several times, and the more I watched it, the more of it I caught. And basically, this idea of 11 dimensions string theory predicts 11 dimensions, and I thought, why 11? That's an odd number. Why would there be 11? And it turns out there's a perfectly good reason that there's 11, and it's got to do with the limitation of possibilities and then infinities of infinities. And just go watch Imagining the 10th Dimension, and at least you'll understand why there's 11 dimensions. 10th dimension may sound like only 10, but 0 is there's a dimension 0. It's not even a point. That'd be dimension 1. But basically, when you start getting into these upper-level dimensional things, you begin to understand that in our three-dimensional world, time is a spatial dimension, and we're traveling through time. Feels like it's not space, but it is space. And he uses the example of a flip book, those flip book animation things of, you flip the pages and you see like a dog running or something like that. And he shows us an example of a flip book of a person aging, just drawings of a person aging. Flip, flip, flip. And he would say that that what we're watching is we're watching three-dimensional pictures of this person, and it looks like time. And so as an analogy of what's happening to us in the fourth dimension. So which one of these pictures is more real? None of them. None of them are more real. It's just the one that's in front of your eyes at that particular moment. And another example, I don't think he used it, I've heard before, is dealing with time is this idea that if you have those of you who may remember records from back in the day when we used to scratch messages to each other on tree barks with sharp rocks. But there were things called records, and they were made of vinyl. And they had a groove on them. And you would look at the record, and the LP album might have 6 songs on there. And you would ask most people, how many grooves are on this record? And they'd look at it, and they'd say, well, there's 6 because there's 6 songs. Or maybe they'd look at it and go, wow, I don't know. I'd try to count all the grooves. It must be thousands. But the answer, of course, is there's one groove on a record. Each side of a record has one groove. And it just goes round and round and round. And so if you think of time that way, you can think of the universe as a record, as an LP. And time or perception is the needle. So if your needle's moving through a groove and you're hearing sound coming out of the record in what seems like real time, is that part of the record any more real than the part of the records that's an inch over to the left that the needle will get to eventually, unless somebody stops the record player or picks up the needle and moves it someplace else? No. There's no part of an album, of a vinyl album, that's more real or less real than any other part. There's just what part is the needle on now. And you can start to think about time that way and our perception of time that way. And so the now that you're watching the show in now is where the needle is right at this instant. And it's not where it was a second ago, and it's not where it's going to be a second from now. Just as a neat little byproduct of this is going out live to, right at the second, 183 people, but it's going to end up on YouTube, and they're going to watch me speak, and they're going to think I'm talking to them because I'm looking right at them, and I'm saying, hello, YouTube viewer out there. But the fact is, you're going to be seeing this days, weeks, months, years later than when it was actually recorded. So which now is more real? The now that you're viewing this in the future, or the now when I'm recording it in your past? There is no more real. I go on all this with Interstellar just to say that the only part about that movie I liked was the idea of the time being a spatial dimension. You got that in the library. Because people will say it's impossible. You can't go forward in time, and then by going forward in time, then go back in time to give yourself the incentive to have gone forward in time in the first place. Somebody had to do it the first time. It's a closed loop. Says who? This is the grandfather argument. You can't go forward in time, invent a time machine, go back and kill your own grandfather because then you'd suddenly disappear. Don't be ridiculous. It's a limit of our ape-like perceptions that can't understand the idea of simultaneity, eternity, or infinity. We have words and we know what the words mean, but we just cannot visualize them. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein. You certainly have a better idea of a model of infinity, you have a better idea of it, but you don't have the neurons. You don't even have close to the neurons to understand infinity. This is why when people, either atheists or religious people, it doesn't really matter, when they try to take the other side and throw them to the mat, you'll hear religious people say to atheists, well, if it all began with the Big Bang, what was before the Big Bang? And then atheists will turn that around and say, well, who created God? And they're both, on some level, I don't want to say they're absurd questions, they're deep questions given the limitation of our brain structure. But if we had brain's just twice the size, and that's not a big deal, by the way. It's going from size of a cantaloupe to size of a watermelon, a pink jelly. It's not an incredible leap to imagine such a thing. If you had probably double the processing power, you could probably come to a place where you understood that eternity and infinity are eternity and infinity. What was before the Big Bang? Nothing. What do you mean nothing? There must have been something. No, you're limited by the fact that you can't understand the fact that there was nothing before this and there's nothing after it. So I happen to think personally, having done a little bit of the looking into the math and the science, I think the universe was baked in one piece, that everything that ever happened and will happen was already in place, and including free will, by the way, which doesn't seem like it would make much sense, but I do believe in free will. I just believe that all the free will that ever happened instantaneously, and even that's a trick of rhetoric, because when I say instantaneously, it's a moment in time. There is no time. Most scientists and most physicists today doing advanced astrophysics say they can make sense of the universe if you get rid of time. And I believe that's probably true. So anyway, that's the only part of Interstellar I really liked. I didn't like the interstellar travel part. I thought the wormhole was fairly cool. I liked the idea of the wormhole looking like a sphere. That was kind of cool. Not sure I much like the idea of Matthew McConaughey holding onto a stick and a throttle and saying, "Here we go," and flying ourselves through a wormhole. I didn't much like that. And I, unless I completely missed something, at the end of the movie, they put the robot into the black hole, and the robot sends out a signal outside through the black hole. And it's like, isn't the definition of a black hole something that electromagnetic radiation can't escape from? It's black because light can't get out. So how's this radio signal getting out? And it's just I just thought it was sloppy, and I didn't connect to it on an emotional level. I didn't. Some people got really moved by the whole thing with the dad and the daughter, and I don't know. I generally like Matthew McConaughey. I just don't know if I bought him as an astrophysicist, scientist, astronaut. It's like, we're going into the wormhole. All right. I get older and the universe stays the same. I don't know. And by the way, there are limits to what I'm willing to overlook. And when just because of sheer laziness, that's all there is to it, just raw laziness. If out of raw laziness, you've got Matthew McConaughey facing the scientists in this concrete space station. It's a circular space station made out of poured concrete. Really? Because honestly, Chris, it looks to me like you didn't have the budget to build a room that looked like it might be an actual space station. It looked like you found a round university hall somewhere and shot it there. But in any event, in this movie, you are in the briefing room, right? You're sitting there. Matthew McConaughey's like, "What are you doing here, Matthew McConaughey?" And it's like, "Well, I found this radio transmission and gravity signal, blah blah blah. That's why I'm here." And then Michael Caine, was it Michael Caine? I think it was Michael Caine, stands up and says, "Well, let me show you something." And he opens a panel, and a panel slides away, and there are the rocket exhaust engines of a Saturn V rocket. They're right there. It's not like they're 40 miles away on a launch pad. They're on the other side of the library. They're literally on the other side of this panel, inside this enclosed building. And so you launch this rocket in the middle of this enclosed building. I mean, does anybody besides me say that if you decided to launch a Saturn V from the inside of a library, that'd be the end of the library? Anybody else make that connection? Because I was laughing out loud when that happened. I was laughing out loud. Here we are in the library. Oh, by the way, here's the giant rocket engines that are going to take this thing into orbit. Really? Oh, well, I see. If it were me and I was building a rocket that could get to orbit, I wouldn't build it inside my office. I'd actually build it out in a field someplace, because having had some experience watching rocket engines go off, they make a lot of noise and a lot of heat and a lot of energy and a lot of air pressure. I generally wouldn't want to put that in my bedroom. But it's just lazy. It's lazy. Michael Caine is awesome, too, because he's the only guy who, if you say two words, you not only get his name, you get him doing his accent of his name. Just say the words cocaine and then my, in that order. My, cocaine, and say them fast, and you not only get his name, but you get his accent. My cocaine. Brilliant. So I wasn't a big fan. My cocaine. All right, there we go. So moving on, Sang Lim says, "Mr. Whittle, I've been meaning to ask you this plenty of times, but so far it's never been chosen. I hope you get a chance to answer it. Here it is." Saying, "What is your opinion on mercenaries and private military contractors?" And then it goes on for, I mean, like 9 paragraphs of really interesting stuff, which I didn't copy. As I said earlier, saying this is a question I've never, ever, ever considered, and I don't know anything about it, but that will not stop you from giving you my full opinion on it. what I have said repeatedly is it's nice to have a consistent philosophy, because if you have a consistent philosophy, you can always go back to your philosophy. So I'll give you my philosophy on mercenaries and private military contractors. Philosophically, I believe in freedom and people being allowed to do what they want to. That's a job. It's an occupation, and there's demand for it, and there's pay, and it requires a skill set. I don't think there's anything different about being a mercenary or a contractor, military contractor, than there's being a plumber. I think it's exactly the same thing, frankly. You have a set of skills that you acquired, and people will pay you for them, and you should have every right to go out there and use those skills. Now, with that said, if your skill set is killing people, then there are limitations on how you're allowed to kill people in this world and not pay a price for it. And most people agree that if you're a nation at war that's declared war with another nation or other group that's declared open war on another, then the killing that occurs in that environment is legal and justified. So from an ethical point of view, I don't have anybody. Military contractors are not in the same group as mercenaries. I mean, military contractor to me is a guy who, if the guy builds a power plant and he does it for a company in, Topeka, Kansas, or he builds a power plant for a company in Baghdad, Iraq, he's just a guy building a power plant. He's just working for a different client. So military contractor is different. I think mercenary is a subset of that that's probably bears a little more explanation or exploration. So look, if your job is to kill people, then the question is, under what conditions are you being hired, and under what conditions are you applying that skill set? There's very limited set of circumstances where mercenaries can function legally and, in my opinion, ethically. But if you've got, look, if John Doistan is at war with John Buckistan, and John Buckistan has $100 million, and they hire 200 former SEALs to help out in their war, then I say to them, rock on. I think the concomitant disadvantage of that is, you may be an American mercenary. You may be a guy who had a severe set of skill sets that you learned in the military, and you may employ those under certain conditions for pay. And I have no problem with any of this, none at all, none. But that doesn't mean that you're operating under the flag of the United States, and therefore you're not owed anything by the flag of the United States. In other words, I think we have an obligation as Americans. If any of our soldiers who are serving in the U.S. Armed Forces get in trouble, I'd send everybody we could after them. I try to rescue them, and I don't care how many people we sent. And on some level, on some philosophical level, I don't want to say I don't care about how many we lose rescue them. I care very much, but I would be willing to do it because I think the most important thing in terms of morale, and certainly in terms of the kind of country I want to live in, is that if one of our people gets in trouble, we will deploy whatever resources we have until we get them out of trouble. And that means everything. That means everything in the box. So if there's the Benghazi story is perfect. It's a perfect storm of everything I hate about this man, everything I hate about Hillary Clinton. And the fact that they're watching these two guys die on TV, these two former military men who are running to the embassy, or to the consulate, I should say, in Benghazi, running not away from the gunfire, towards the gunfire, and holding off something like 75 to 100 individuals, just the two of them, for 6 hours underneath the eyes of that drone, and waiting for help to come, and help was never on its way. It's not like the help didn't get there in time. The help was never on its way. They just said, no, don't, turn the helicopters off, shut them down, and bring the rescue crews home. It's too risky to go get them. They'll be dead by the time we get there anyway. Well, they said 2-hour flight to get there by helicopters. The guys fought for 6 hours. So they could have gotten them out, but they didn't. And that's, what do you say about that? I mean, they were going to defend the embassy. They were hired by Americans to defend the embassy, and I just don't know what to say about that. But if you've got a guy who is a former Green Beret, let's say, and he's fighting in Joe Buckistan against some guys from, John Doistan, then he doesn't get to call for help from us. He's not working for us. He's working for himself. That's the downside of mercenaries. One of the things I learned from that great Traveller science fiction game was one of the occupations in in that game was Mercenary, and I got from that game I got the idea of a repatriation bond, where basically a significant sum of money is held in escrow to get you out of there, and that if you got out of there, then that would be paid to the people that got you out of there. It's kind of a insurance policy that they don't just throw you away. So as far as the ethics of it go, it depends on who's fighting who and why. It's not hard to imagine a person who's real good at killing people and does so under the constraints of the United States military going out and getting a job and not being such a nice guy. But that's not America's problem, and that's not a stain on America's honor. He's not in American uniform. He's not one of us. He's an individual citizen who, like any other person, is making decisions, and I certainly don't equate all mercenaries with criminals. I don't think vast majority of them are. But if you become a paid soldier and you go someplace and commit atrocities, then you're a murderer, and you're a murderer. You're an assassin, and that's it. You have to pay the consequences of that. So I don't know if that really helped you. I know you listed a lot of examples saying, but I really do believe in this idea of freedom and choice, and it's an occupation, and it's a skill set, and it's certainly, my understanding is that in the private world you get paid a lot better than you do in the military. But yeah, I don't have any problem with the idea. I don't have any problem with the concept. I think you have to ask yourself on a case-by-case basis, is this person behaving ethically and honorably? And if they're not, then they're criminals. And there you go. Joshua Tiemans of the Tiemans Collectives says, who's your pick for a wartime president, alive or dead, real or fictional, and why? Well, if it's real or fictional, I'll go with James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. There's a guy who knows what he likes. He's not a mean guy. He's not a sadistic guy. He's just confident, and he knows what he wants. I think probably real is probably a better question. It's hard to say, really. It's easier to pick a wartime general, because if you have a wartime general, I want guys like Patton, and I want guys like, I hate it when I just, Curtis LeMay. And I think that the essential quality of a wartime president is a guy who's got the nerve and the courage to fight and win, and at the same time has to have certain mitigating qualities that I wouldn't want in a general. He has to have a certain amount of mercy and a certain amount of, I almost said decency, but it's not really. Restraint maybe is a somewhat better word. In other words, I think the perfect wartime president is a guy who's keeping a firm hand on the leash of wartime generals, and those generals don't have any of that mitigating qualities. I want those wartime generals out there, kicking ass. The two great stories about this, kind of what I think a wartime general should be, is, Patton was moving Third Army through the south of France after he broke out of Normandy. He's moving faster than his supplies, and I forget what the town was, and somebody's going to point it out to me because they'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm just sketching it out because I just remember it vaguely from memory. But Patton's moving Third Army through the south of Germany, and he says there's a city, let's say, it's Boulogne. It wasn't Boulogne, but let's just say it was. And he says, I'm gonna detach a regiment. I'm gonna take Boulogne. And Ike, back at headquarters, says, George, you can't take that town with a regiment. You're forbidden to do it. I forbid you to do it. You hold your position and or just keep going. And then 2 hours later, he radios back and he says, have taken Boulogne with one regiment. Do you want me to give it back? That's what you want for a wartime general. Curtis LeMay said something that I just loved. I mean, LeMay was you make a pretty good case he was a warmonger. Well, of course he's a warmonger. A monger is somebody who sells something, and LeMay sells war. It's what he was good at. And I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. But LeMay said, he had this is one of my favorite quotes ever. He had the Strategic Air Command. He had all these nuclear bombers and nuclear missiles under his command. And as I've said this on the show several times, one of my favorite quotes ever, the motto of the Strategic Air Command was a mailed fist. It was an armored fist, a knight's fist, and there were lightning bolts in the fist. It's the greatest logo ever. But the motto of the Strategic Air Command was "Peace is our profession," and I thought that was a great motto for the Strategic Air Command. Wonderful motto for the Strategic Air Command: "Peace is our profession," because they understood the deterrent power of these nuclear weapons, and that's why we never got into a big war after there were nuclear weapons. In any event, Curtis LeMay, who's commander of SAC, who invented SAC, basically was asked about this once, and he said to the press, he said, "Yeah, peace is our profession. War is just something we do for kicks." And that's exactly what I want in my generals. I want the enemies of this country to think that it's only through my restraint that these mad dogs are not unleashed. Was it mad dogs, not unleashed? But that's the difference between a wartime president and a wartime general. The wartime general shouldn't be unleashed. He shouldn't have any desire to be unleashed. The wartime general should be like Patton or LeMay, should be just attack dogs. But the correct president should be the kind of guy who is willing to let them go to work, but also understands that there is more to a war than the military. There's the political aspect of it. There's the quality of mercy, and there's the post-war reality, and there's a lot of variables that a general shouldn't be weighing. That's the president's job. Now, when you get into wartime presidents, you got a couple of good choices here. I think I know a lot of people have a problem with Abe Lincoln, and a lot of people think that the federalism of the North and make the case for states' rights. But I have to tell you, Sherman, who was, without question, William Tecumseh Sherman was the first modern Western wartime general. Sherman was the first general to understand that this is not just a war of armies on battlefields, that this is a war of civilizations, of cultures. Sherman basically said from day one, we're going to have to burn the South to the ground, and we're going to have to burn the fight out of them in order for this thing to be over. He understood that real early. He was called insane in the beginning of the war. They relieved him of his command because he said it's going to be a long war, and it's going to be a tough war, and it's not going to end until the South is on fire, because they're not going to stop fighting until that happens. So Sherman, who is not a pushover by any means, Sherman is one of the most rabid, aggressive, determined, tough generals that the world has ever produced, let alone this country. But Sherman, who met Lincoln only once on board that ship, in Anchor, just right after the fall of Richmond, hours afterwards. Sherman said of Lincoln, he said he'd never seen anybody who could combine so many qualities of greatness and goodness into one man. It's the goodness that matters. Lincoln lived long enough to go and sit in Jefferson Davis's chair. Lincoln had the courage to walk through Richmond 7 hours after Lee's army evacuated the town, with rebel sharpshooters potentially behind every single building. Lincoln rode on a horse through Richmond with a detachment of 12 cavalrymen. That's it. The President of the United States, who didn't win a single popular vote in the deep Confederacy, the 7 states of the Confederacy, the original 7 states, Abraham Lincoln did not win a single vote. Forget electoral vote. He didn't win a single vote, not even as a gag, in any one of those 7 states. He was the most despised man ever in the South. Had the courage to ride with an escort of 12 troopers through Richmond a few hours after Lee's army has left, walks across Jefferson Davis's famous intimidating white rug, because everybody had boots on and mud and everything, sat in his chair, and was president of the whole United States for a while. And Lincoln, even then, while the war was still being fought, was basically saying, let these people up easy. We can't, they're our countrymen. We disagreed, and now the war's over, and we need to treat them as our countrymen. We need to pardon them all. We need to pardon the political leadership, and then the upper level political leadership. Grant asked him, what should we do with them? And he just kind of went shoo them away, like he'd be happy if they just left the country. So Lincoln was, he's an amazing balance. And Lincoln, the reason I keep coming back to Lincoln, he had that kindness, and the guards outside the White House for years would walk down the aisles, the aisles in the bedrooms of the White House. And even these hardened guards would sometimes they'd just be moved to tears because they could hear Lincoln moaning in his sleep, just moaning and thrashing and wailing and moaning for years. Lincoln practically died of exhaustion. There's a good side-by-side picture of him in 1860 and 1864. He looks like he's aged 30 years in those 4 years. And the fact that he was just tormented and moaning in his sleep, and it's just, that's what a wartime president needs. He needs that sense of decency. And Lincoln would say things like, "I'm supposed to shoot a farm boy for deserting and not touch the hair of the agitator who's incited him to desert. I'd rather shoot the agitator and leave the farm boy to go back to the farm." It was a tremendous decency, and yet he had the strength, right? I mean, Shelby Foote was talking about Abraham Lincoln, and what Lincoln was looking for, as most of you know, the Army of the Potomac just got whipped again and again and changed commanders. What was it, 7 times? McClellan, was McDermott? What's his name? McDowell. McDowell, McClellan, Burnside, Hooker. I'm missing one or two. What's his name? Second Manassas guy. Anyway, you get the idea, right? So general after general after general after general, and defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. And after Fredericksburg, which was one of the worst defeats ever, just appalling loss, just a catastrophe. That was Burnside, so there's another one. After Fredericksburg, Lincoln sat down and said, if we were to have a series of catastrophes like Fredericksburg, if we were to suffer a Fredericksburg every month or every week, in 6 months the war would be over and we would win, because we have the kind of resources that we can afford those kind of horrific defeats. As long as we just keep having them, as long as we just don't run away from them, we can be annihilated the way we were at Fredericksburg and still win the war. And Lincoln, according to Shelby Foote said what Lincoln was looking for was a term I never forgot. I read it, I never forgot, went right to the heart of me. He said he was looking for the killer mathematician. Lincoln used the term, he needed a general who could face the numbers. And basically what Lincoln is saying is, we're going to have to kill 1 million of our guys to win this war. And I need a general who's willing to go out and do it, because we're not going to get out of this lighter than this. There's no cheap way to pay this bill. He wanted a general who could face the arithmetic. That's the term he used. A general who could face the arithmetic, which meant that we just have to keep going at him and going after him. Pope, thank you, guys. So yeah, and so when you got a guy who's having nightmares about having to hang a farm boy for desertion, at the same time he's trying to find a general who can put 500,000 men in the ground to win this thing. That's as good as it gets, I would say, in terms of balance. Churchill had that quality of decency. Reagan had that quality of toughness and decency. I think Roosevelt was actually a catastrophe for the country. It was one of the worst things that happened to this country domestically. But as a wartime president, I thought he was rather good. He tried to get us... He had a very fine line to walk in the beginning of the war. He was sending supplies and destroyers and jeeps and tanks not only to Britain but to Russia before we were at war. And if he hadn't been so arrogant with regards to Joseph Stalin, if he didn't think that he could charm Joseph Stalin, I don't know if he could have much improved on Franklin as a wartime president. But God knows he was a catastrophe in terms of everything else. All right, we got a couple here more, 4 more to go, and then we'll get on out of here. I might go get some dinner and see what's going on. Maybe have an evening out of the office. Dave Bowman is mystified. He's stunned. Look at the expression on his face. All right, here we go. Kurt Von Arnold says, Bill, you commented on this dynamic in a recent PJ Media video. I was wondering if you could expand upon the American sniper skirmish in the context of the larger culture war. Also, will Hollywood executives, considering the success of American Sniper, be forced through sheer economics to limit the films they love to make and start making films they love to hate? And somebody included a graphic that somebody had made, and I actually had a term I like a lot, and somebody used this term because I made the argument and I didn't get the credit for it. I'm not normally, really pissy about that kind of thing, but basically what I've said a couple times about this, said it in the Afterburner that I did on it too, was if America isn't evil, then the left's out of business. And that's why they hate American Sniper, because it shows not only how tough these guys are, but how decent they are. And the argument is, if you go see American Sniper and everybody likes Bradley, they love him. And if you see this guy and he's a decent man, a good man, doing a tough job, if he's a decent, loving man, then maybe the rest of the army is composed of decent, loving people. And if it's decent, loving people in the army, then maybe this cause is not an evil cause. And if it's not an evil cause, fighting in Iraq, then maybe it's not an evil country. And if it's not an evil country, the left is finished. Their entire argument is predicated on the idea that we're evil and they're here to cure us. We're going to fundamentally change the United States of America, said Barack Obama 4 days before he was elected, and began to fundamentally change it, or 8 days or whatever it was. If the country is good, why would you fundamentally change it? If the country's fundamentally good, why would you want to fundamentally change it? It's only when you believe the country's fundamentally evil that you get traction with change and hope that you can get out of this Mordor of living hell of capitalism and greed and evil corporations killing authentic people for oil. I hope that we can change this monster, is basically what Barack Obama ran on. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We hope that we can change this evil, horrible thing. And then you go and see a movie and you see a guy you like who's very personable, and you don't just get explanations for the numbers of people that were missed. You see Bradley not pull the trigger based on moral decisions. You think this is a good man. It's a good man. He is a good man. The Kyle that he was based on is a good man. And that means that it was composed of a good army, and a good army doing a good cause for a good reason, which means it's a good country that sent them there, which means that the president probably was a pretty good guy, and left's out of business. You can't show this to the American people. It has to be banned. It has to be stopped. And that's why they hate American Sniper so much. I've heard anecdotally that some people are boycotting the Academy Awards because of the presence of American Sniper. I heard that famed hypocrite Sean Penn is not going to show up because American Sniper was nominated. So think about that. I'm going to boycott the Academy Awards, which are the celebration of movies in the United States of America, because here's a movie that made the United States of America look good, and I simply will not be a part of that. I will not countenance it. What do you need to know? You know, Seth Rogen said that American Sniper felt like the propaganda film in the third act of Inglourious Bastards. Well, that's a Nazi propaganda film. And somebody said, "You're calling Americans Nazis?" No, I'm not calling them Nazis. Of course you are, Seth. Man up and stop being such a chicken shit. Of course you are. If you don't like the heat, get out of the kitchen. You said exactly what was on your mind. You said it was Nazi propaganda. People called you on it, and you start backpedaling. No, you don't get to backpedal your way out of this. We know how you feel. The thing that's interesting about Seth Rogen, and people, I don't want to sound like I'm a guest on Oprah or Jerry Springer. Is he going there? Yes, I'm going to go there. Seth Rogen, I would imagine, lost a fair number of ancestors to the Nazis, and I get a feeling that they're in heaven looking down on him, comparing the United States of America to Nazi Germany, and wanting to smack him upside his fat little face. What do you do about these people? I don't know. I don't know what you do about them. I know that it. See, the problem with American Sniper is if you had made American Sniper the way that, let's say, Brian De Palma, who made Redacted. If you make American Sniper the way that Brian De Palma would have made it, he's a murderer. And the nobility would have been somebody calling him, or maybe at the end of the movie he would have realized he's a murderer working for evil, and he would have woken up, and he would have burst through the corporate, war for oil kind of mentality, and he would have realized how awful he was, and he would have made amends or atoned for it or something like that. That's how they would have made it. So but the problem is this: if you do that, if you have a guy whose job is killing people with a high-powered rifle, and you're a leftist and you believe in things like gun control and all this other stuff, then you cannot have a man using a rifle for good. You can't have it. It's got to go. It invalidates their entire argument, and it shows you what hypocrites they are, which is why I have such a problem with Jamie Foxx. I mean, honest to God, Jamie, pick a side, right? You can have it one way or another, but you can't have it both ways, Jamie. You cannot be in favor of gun control. You can be in favor of gun control, and you can buy that whole argument. I don't agree with that argument, but you can make the argument, and you can be wrong, but you can make it, and you can stick by it. I think gun violence is terrible, and I think it should be stopped, and I don't want any part of it, and I'm dead set against it. After Sandy Hook, there's a video about gun violence, and Jamie Foxx is in this video. Okay. But the only reason people have ever heard of Jamie Foxx is because Jamie Foxx has been in 15 movies where he's had guns blazing in his hands and he's killed probably 1,000 people on camera. He was in Django Unchained, was in theaters when this anti-gun thing came out. And Django Unchained, 60 people just shot dead by Jamie Foxx with a shooter Colt. Jamie Foxx makes a living killing people with guns on camera. That's why people pay him the money he's paid, and you don't get to have it both ways. And even now, I want to say to them, anybody who's made Liam Neeson, apparently, I didn't even get the Liam Neeson story. I didn't even hear about it, but apparently it just missed it. Sometimes things just, maybe I'm tying my shoes and goes over my head. But all of a sudden I wake up and everybody's like, all the pro-gun community's condemning Liam Neeson. So I imagine he said some pretty anti-gun things. So my point is, okay, Liam, fair enough. If you think guns are awful, fair enough. Sign a pledge publicly and just tell the rest of us that you're never going to use a gun in a movie again. You will never pick up a gun in a movie again, Liam, right? Because we know how evil they are to you. So you're going to swear now you're never going to use a gun in a movie again, right? Right? When they want to make Taken 4 for, $5 million? Nope. $12 million? Nope. $15 million, Liam? Maybe I'll do Taken 4. Yeah? You gonna go out there with a harshly worded letter? Is that what you're going to use? Or are you going to use a gun like you did in Taken 1, 2, and 3? It's just the hypocrisy of it that's intolerable. And that's why they hate American Sniper, because there's no hypocrisy in it. There's no hypocrisy in American Sniper. He's using a gun. Why is he using a gun? To kill bad guys. He's killing bad guys? Yeah. Is he a murderer? No. He's sparing the innocent. He's a good man. Holy crap, we got to bury this thing. So, that's why the left hates it. And they hate it, guys. They hate it because it's not us talking about Iraq was a good war, me standing there with a PowerPoint demonstration. We're using their weapons against them. We're telling a story very effectively by a guy who really knows what he's doing. And it's gaining traction. It was the biggest January opening ever. You can't have the American people seeing Iraq as a success story or Afghanistan as a success story. My God, the left will be out of business. Yeah, well, good. So the second part of the question is, does this mean that the left is going to start making more movies like this because that's where the money is? No, of course not. I have to credit Jeremy on this one. Jeremy basically nailed it. Jeremy Boring has been to enough pitch meetings, been in Hollywood long enough, and certain other people I know have been around Hollywood people long enough. It's not their money. It's not their money. When Brian De Palma made Redacted, it wasn't his money. It's not like Brian De Palma put up $12 million or $7 or whatever to make that movie. It's not his money. It probably came from Emirates or came from, Kuwait or something, or China. It's not his money. And so if you say you have to, this is the part that Jeremy was spot on, and I've never heard it put better than this. Jeremy is exactly right. Brian De Palma would rather go to a party in the Hollywood Hills, having made a movie stuffing it to the conservatives and those knuckle-dragging religious nuts and that idiot George Bush that made $25,000 because that was a domestic gross for a widescreen release of a film with an A-list director. $25,000. My book made more money than that in a weekend. Silent America made $28,000 in 4 days, and that was a self-published book from a guy with a blog. But Brian De Palma would rather go up there and have made Redacted and made $25,000 in profit than have gone up there and made Sniper and made $100 million in profit, because it's not about the money. It's about the pose. Brian De Palma can pose as a guy who's, I'm against war. I'm against war. Really, Brian? What a frickin'... man, I've never come so close to censoring myself. I mean, that was that close. What a frickin' advanced moral position you have, Brian. My God, you're so much better than me. You're against war, are you really? Against it? Wow. What an incredibly advanced moral position to take. The idea that Clint Eastwood might be against war and that Bradley Cooper might be against war, and the idea that Kyle might be against war is just... You might want to bring that up because they are. This is the thing. I'm against war. Well, you know what? I'm the biggest hawk on the planet, Brian and Matt and Jamie. I'm against war. I'm against killing. I am too, you stupid D-bag. Of course I am. Everybody is, any sane person, forget about a conscience, is against war. The question is it worth fighting? Do you have to do it? And if you have to do it, then why don't you just do it and not sit there and say, I'm against this thing that I'm doing. I'm against guns. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry. Guns are evil and wrong, and they're very, very bad, and anyone who has a gun's a bad guy. I'm Liam Neeson, and take my... Excuse me 1 second. If you touch her, I will kill you. Come on. Pick a position and stand there, you... It's hard living in Hollywood. It's not easy. It's enough to make a person want to go someplace else. Just leave. I'll get there eventually. I have a lease. And so there you go. All right, here we go. We got 3 to go. Short ones, it looks like. Janine Ron says, autobiography time. Okay. What were you like in your lefty Hollywood days? It's hard to imagine the get up and go gumption and inquisitiveness of that kid who got his own planetarium gig fitting in with the smug complacency and conformity of wannabe in Hollywood and actually in Hollywood types. Wow. Okay. That's also actually kind of on point. First of all, you should know that when I was at my most leftist, when I was at my most liberal, and David Horowitz has told me never use that word again, he's right. But you should know that at the moment of my most progressive leftist political views, that at that time, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I need to make it crystal clear. At the most left-wing I was, the most left-wing day of my life, I was pro-military, I was pro-business, and I was pro-America. I wanted to make movies for a profit. I wanted to go to businessmen and convince them that this was a wise investment of their capital, which I would then turn into more capital than they put into the movie. And that I had no desire to do grants, and people said, go apply for grants. I'm not going to apply for a grant and wait for 4 months for the government to hand me money. No, I'm going to go find a guy who's got some money, convince him it's a smart investment. I think it's a smart investment. Turns out I was an idiot, but I didn't know that at the time. So I just wanted on the record that when I was at my most left-wing, I wasn't really anything like today's leftists. I loved this country. I loved business. I loved the military. And I had just gotten into show business and theater because my opportunity to fly at supersonic speeds and shoot down communists had been taken out of my hands after 12 years of preparation. So I wasn't like your left-wingers today, and he's my boss, and I have enormous respect for David Horowitz, enormous respect for him. But David Horowitz, when he was a left-winger, he was one of the guys who was writing the Port Huron Statement trying to destroy America. I don't have that to atone for. I just had some dopey ideas because I thought the hot girls felt the same way, and I didn't know any better. What the hell did I know? So, I just have to get that said, mostly because I'm so ashamed of it. But I was never in that headspace out here in California. I was in that headspace when I was a freshman at the University of Florida, 79, 80, 81, 82. I was hanging out with theater people. I was in the theater department, and nobody knew anything about anything, so we all felt, because we're emotional people, we're in show business, we all felt very, 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 very passionately about things we knew nothing about. Nothing. We knew nothing about anything. And that's the thing that's so interesting to me about the left, and that's why I find it so easy to flip these people. I didn't know anything about anything, and I was violently passionate about things I knew nothing about. Nothing. Gun control sounds like a grand idea. I've said this before. I've admitted it in public. It's not something that's easy to say. But I voted for Walter Mondale in 1984 because he said he was going to raise taxes. And I thought, well, good, we need tax money to do stuff. And, you know why I didn't have any problem with Walter Mondale raising taxes when I voted for him in 1984? Because I wasn't paying any taxes in 1984. That's why I was stone cold broke. So that's another lesson I learned over time. But look, the second that I heard reason, I just started to change my mind. Nobody had to beat it into me. I'm not a 9/11 conservative. I didn't suddenly wake up and go, holy cow, they're trying to kill us. I was talking with somebody about this just the other day. It was about 1985, 86, 87, somewhere in there, and I was reading Newsweek magazine, which I read for the cartoons, and there was a column by George Will, and he was talking about the movie Glory, which I loved, because even then I loved the Civil War. I thought it was a great movie. And he was saying that these progressive leaders, black community leaders, were saying, saying to Reagan, we need you to give us a victory. And George Will said, if I give it to you, it's not a victory, it's a gift. It's not, you haven't earned anything. And Will went into Glory and basically said that the whole point of Glory, the whole reason they made a movie was because of what the actual 54th Massachusetts Regiment did. And what they did was, when they went into battle at Battery Wagner that day in South Carolina, this black regiment went marching past, forget what the Confederates thought about them, we know what the Confederates thought about them, but they went marching past white Union soldiers who thought they were sandbags. They thought they were just useless, that they were slaves. And they went marching past these white Union soldiers who had nothing but prejudice and hatred for these black soldiers. And when the battle was over, the white soldiers didn't feel that way anymore. They saw the heroism with their own eyes. They saw the casualties they took. They saw them fighting just like white men and dying just like white men for the same reason. And when that battle was over, the 54th Massachusetts got to be the subject of a movie because the prejudice wasn't overcome through fiat. It was earned. It was earned. They earned it. They proved it. And I read this in 85, 86, 87, something like that from George Will, and I thought, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's like, this guy's a big conservative. It's like, well, okay, it makes a lot of sense. And then I started getting into P.J. O'Rourke, and P.J. O'Rourke not only made sense, P.J. O'Rourke was funny. And I remember P.J. O'Rourke saying, that, we believe in fast cars and loud guns and hot women, and they're the weenies. We're not the weenies. What's the matter with you? And I thought, yeah. And he would just start going off, and he'd say, capitalism's not perfect. There's a lot of problems with capitalism, but I've been around the world with Rolling Stones, and every place else just sucks. And it's suddenly you realize that it's, when you're living in the theater and you're watching Michael Jackson walk up a wall and you see people flying on moons through the sky, you really do measure America against a fictional perfect society. And yeah, it sucks, but there are no fictional perfect societies. You only get to measure America against places that exist for real. And when you measure it against places that exist for real, it's paradise. And that's a big wake-up call for a lot of people. And some people never get there. They just never do. It's like, yes, it'd be nice if things were nicer, but they're not. So where are they nicer? Nowhere. What's it tell you? Do more of the good stuff, do less of the bad stuff. Perfection's the enemy of the good. I'd like to live in a perfect place, but there are no perfect places. So I'd rather live in a good place. And the people who are determined to live in a perfect place make a living hell because they start killing the people that they perceive are slowing down the perfection. And that's not the kind of place I want to live at all. Down to the last two, and here we go. Joshua Tiemann's one of the Tiemann Borg collectives. Borg were about the only thing out of Next Generation that were kind of cool. They were like, all right, that's, all right. Joshua Tiemann says, what's the most plausible dystopia you've ever read or watched? The most plausible dystopia I've ever read or watched, Joshua, is the Soviet Union. And that's not fiction, and it's not hyperbole, and it's not invention. I was speaking in high school of my college days and being, I still don't consider myself a left-winger. I guess I was, but it just doesn't seem like it compared to what the left is today. In any event, we hear about how awful the Nazis are, but we never hear about how bad the communists were unless you're talking to one of those right-wing nut jobs who is seeing communists everywhere. Well, it turns out you were seeing communists everywhere because they were everywhere. McCarthy, I'm not a fan of McCarthy's tactics, but when McCarthy said there's communists all throughout the State Department, McCarthy was right. And when the left said that, the Rosenbergs were innocent, they weren't innocent. They were guilty. They sold nuclear secrets to the biggest mass murderers in history. And Alger Hiss was no. Turns out, no. All these charges against the communists were right. Turns out the communists were running the Communist Party from USA, from the Kremlin. So is it that bad? It is. You just cannot imagine that a society could exist on Earth like the Soviet Union. But it did for 70 years. I know I'm going over ground. I cover a little more. I'm going over ground I've talked about a lot recently. But that was Stalin who came in and made it bad. No, it was Lenin. Lenin invented the Cheka. He invented the secret police. Lenin invented the show trials. Lenin sent innocent people to die because he thought it'd be good for the revolution. Lenin is a mass murderer, and Lenin established the state that Stalin took over. I've said it before on the show. I've probably said it 5 times on the show. This is not for the faint-hearted, but if you've got the stomach to find out what people are actually did to each other, not capable of doing in 1984, some piece of fiction set on Planet Tralfamador, no. I mean, I'm talking about like really happened. Go to YouTube and look and watch The Chekist. It's you don't want to watch it with your kids, mostly because of endless, total, nonstop, full frontal nudity of both men and women. Because this guy decided if I put these people in jogging shorts It's going to take away from the reality of it. And you see the Czechist, and you'll see that for 70 years, in the basement of the Lubyanka, there was a wall. And people would line up naked, 6 at a time, and get shot in the back of the head. Started at sunset, went on till dawn every day for freaking 70 years. Millions and millions of people just executed. Millions more, 7, 8, 9 million starved to death. The kulaks. Starving to death is not a good way to go, folks. Starved to death in the countryside, and then the millions of people who were sent to the gulags, the millions of them, who never came back, who died out there on the taiga, out on the frozen Russian plains, and all of them thought, communism made a mistake. If only Stalin knew about these camps. Stalin murdered everybody. He murdered everybody. He murdered his former allies when they were no longer useful. He murdered them, and he brought in new people. And when they were no longer useful, they murdered them. If you want to watch just a taste of it, BillWhittle.com, go to the firewall page and look for The Murderers in the Kremlin. I talk about the five of these secret police guys, Dzerzhinsky, Mazhinsky, Yagoda, Yezhov, Beria, and Putin. The Yezhov, they called him the Blackberry. He's a dwarf. They called him the dwarf, the evil dwarf. He was 5 foot tall. He murdered millions of people. And he seems like he was actually a pretty decent guy when he wasn't murdering millions of people. And so, the communists, the people who support the socialism thing, the communism, well, they didn't do it right. Oh, really? Well, where did they do it right? Oh, no. Stalin was, he wasn't a communist. He wasn't a true communist. He was a Stalinist. Oh, yeah, that's why he murdered people, because he didn't do it right. I see. So communism works in China then, where Mao killed 30 million people, 40 million maybe. No, he didn't do it right either. Oh, okay, so where do we go now? Do we look at Adolf Hitler and National Socialism? Is that how it's done right? No. He was a really awful guy. No, he didn't do it right either. How about Cambodia? Did he do it right in Cambodia with Pol Pot? He killed 7 million people. No, they didn't do it right there either. What about in Cuba? Was it done right in Cuba? Communism, Fidel Castro killed thousands of people, just lined up kids and shot them in the head. How about that? No, he didn't do it right either. Well, honestly, socialists, if it turns out that your track record is 100 million to 200 million people dead, and they can't do it right, then maybe this isn't the best idea of all time. Maybe the idea that putting unlimited power of total power in the hands of a small group of intellectuals determines the fact that the toughest, most murderous bastards are going to find their way to the top and kill everybody. If that's what happens every single time you employ your system, then maybe it's not that they're not doing it right. Maybe they're doing it exactly right. Maybe they're doing it exactly the way it's designed to be done, and that's why it keeps turning out the same. Maybe it's time to stop this idea, Just me. I mean, if I put my hand on a red-hot stove and I burn my hand to the point where I've got permanent scars, and I do it again, 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 it's not like I'm not touching the stove right. I think I'd probably learn that after the second time. I wouldn't touch it a second time because I'm a little smarter than that. But if I did touch it a second time and got burned that badly, that would be enough for me. I wouldn't have to do it 9 times or 15 times or 20 times, and then after 20 times sit there and say, I'm still not touching this thing right. There's got to be a way to touch it right. Maybe you shouldn't be touching a red-hot stove, just a, off the top of my head kind of a thing. So it's the Soviet Union for real, Joshua. It's not a novel, and it's not a fantasy, and it's not some guy's vision of how things could go really wrong. It's what actually happened. The Czechist, Checkist. It's in Russian with English subtitles. It's brutal. And the genius of this guy who made this movie, it's made by a Russian, I want to say it's about 2009. So you start off by watching these people just marching down the stairs into Lubyanka, and the guards pulling them out of this underground cellars, look like wine cellars, and there are people in there praying, and one by one they're called out, and they're taken down the hall, and they're stripped of their clothes, and they're lined up against the wall. They're shot in the back of the head. They're put on a meat cart. The next 6 people come in, and then those first six people who've just been shot are taken to a board with a hole in the roof. They're in the basement, and there's a rope that comes down like a noose, and they put this noose around their feet and haul the corpses up to the meat wagon. And there they sit, fully naked people, being hauled out like the exterminated cattle that they are. And I thought, man, this guy had a lot of guts to show that. When I'm watching the movie, I thought, that's a pretty powerful scene. And I thought the rest of the movie was going to be like, okay, well, we've got that established. But the genius of that movie was, no, he just spends the whole movie there. So you're watching the movie, and it's like, as these guys are talking and as you're learning about these characters in the background, 6 at a time, you know, and some of the things that these people were saying as they were being led off to be executed were so bizarre that you knew they must have been true. This one little old lady is like walking next to this Chekist who's about to shoot her. She knows she's going to get shot because she saw the 6 people ahead of her get shot. She's standing there, stark naked, walking up against the wall, and she says to this guard, "Will somebody please feed my cats?" And the guy says, "Yes, ma'am, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. No problem, we'll be sure to take care of that for you." "Oh, okay, well, as long as my cats are going to be okay." And they walk up to the wall. They walk up to the wall. There's a true story about this that I read on a book on Stalin. A guy found a woman in 1996 or something like this, 5-6 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. And he found her, and she had a little carpet bag, not a little carpet bag, a big carpet bag. And he interviewed her for the book on Stalin. Simon Sebag-Lifari, I think, the Red Tsar, Court of the Red Tsar, a fantastic book. And Life and Fate by Grossman. In any event, he found this woman, and she had a giant carpet bag full of pictures. And he interviewed her, and she was fairly famous. She was on the inner circle, Stalin's inner circle. So she brings out these pictures. Here's my husband who was murdered by Stalin. Here's my 2 sons who were murdered by Stalin. Here's my father and mother who were murdered by Stalin. Here's this other guy who was murdered by Stalin, and my uncle who was murdered by Stalin, and my 2 brothers who were murdered by Stalin. And she shows him the pictures, and when she's done, she turns to him and says, "Despite everything, I still believe in communism." And I believe her. I believe that she still believes in communism. Because it was the belief, right? It was the belief. It was the wishing it were true. And of all the things I've ever read in my life that made my blood run cold, it was that woman who's had her entire family exterminated by one individual's decisions. And at the end of it, she goes, I still believe in this great idea that all of my relatives were murdered for. You deserve what you got. Last question for the night. John Fritsch asks, how would President Whittle restore widespread faith in capitalism? I decided to take that question because I thought about this earlier today. I would do it. I would talk about Uber. That's how I would do it. I just say, you want to know what we believe, what we conservatives believe, your new Republican president believes? I believe in Uber. And that's how you'd never lose, you wouldn't lose you win elections for 30 years if you went out there and told the American people that you believe in Uber and the Democrats believe in the taxi company. Why can't anybody do this? Is this really this hard? I keep banging the table and we get our little earthquake effect in here. Is it this hard to be able to do this, honestly? It's really this simple. Your Republican president would restore faith in Americans' faith in capitalism by saying, I believe in Uber. What do you mean you believe in Uber? Have you ever used Uber? Yes. Why do you like Uber? Because it's awesome. What's awesome about Uber? Well, it's there in a minute and a half, and it costs $11, where a cab takes 45 minutes and costs $60. I agree. And the drivers are regular citizens. They're not professional D-bags. They seem to be nice people. I've never had a bad Uber experience. I believe in Uber. I believe in the fact that I should be able to step outside, hit a little button on my phone, and then this thing, ping, your car will be here in a minute and a half, and your driver's name will be Otto, and he has 4.9 stars, and he's going to take you in his Prius to LAX, and it's going to cost you $21 instead of $65, or whatever the case may be. And when people say, well, what do you mean you believe in Uber as a Republican? It's like, look, this is somebody's idea, and people voluntarily sign up for it. They do a basic background check on the drivers, but they're not saying we're responsible for the drivers. They do a basic background check, and people love it. And it's convenient, and it's inexpensive, and it's great. And the reason the Democrats can't stand it, and the reason you can get dropped off at LAX on Uber but not picked up at LAX on Uber, is because the Democrats and the unions and the taxi unions and all these other people understand that Uber is the end of them. Uber is the end of taxi cabs. So, of course, they have to legally prevent them from picking up people at LAX, because if they didn't legally prevent them from picking up people at LAX, there wouldn't be any cabs anymore. And the reason the Democrats and the cabs and the unions hate Uber is because they're not making any money off of Uber. Uber doesn't pay the government anything. Uber just provides excellent service at very low prices. And one of the reasons the prices are so low is because they don't pay the government anything. So I was taking Uber out of the airport today, and we talked to a guy who he'd been working for Uber for quite a long time. And he said that after Uber got more and more popular, the LAX commission basically said to Uber, to the company, well, I'll tell you what, we'll let you pick up people at LAX for a $10 surcharge. So in other words, if you pick up somebody at LAX, you have to add $10 to the price of the ride, and we'll take the $10. And Uber apparently said thanks but no thanks, because a $6 ride out of LAX down the street to Sepulveda Boulevard in El Segundo or something now becomes a $16 ride. And what else do you need to know? This is what the Democrats do. This is what the unions do. This is what socialists do. They take your money for any way they can. If they're not making enough money on a gas tax in California because everybody's driving a fuel-efficient car, then we're going to put on a mileage tax. We're going to take your money one way or another at gunpoint. You might as well get used to it. And I, as a Republican, believe that you should be able to hire somebody to take you someplace pretty simply and cheaply. And if you don't like it, then don't do it. If you think Uber's unsafe and they don't check the drivers, then take a cab. I'm not saying get rid of cabs. I'm saying you should have the choice. Democrats can't stand Uber. It's the end of their monopoly. It's the end of everything. So, boom. All these apps. See, this is the bigger picture. Is this all of this information age stuff is doing end runs around bureaucracy. It's moving too fast for bureaucracy to keep up with. It's too efficient. It's too effective. It's too local. It's too democratic. The bureaucracies in the government can't keep up with it. That's why they hate it, and that's why they have to try and destroy it. So Republicans can either get on that side of it, or they can wait till the Democrats paint themselves as the champions of Uber as they destroy Uber. And that's what'll happen, because we don't know how to tie our shoelaces. Some of us do anyway. I think I need a martini. I think I'll do it for episode 88 of the Stratosphere Lounge, which is now 1 hour 46 minutes and 43 seconds. See, there's that time thing again. Long. It's as long as it will be when I hit the end of the record button, and that length will have been determined before the dinosaurs walked the earth. Isn't that interesting? But as always, thanks to everybody, and again, a special thanks this week to everybody. As I said, those of you who were able to help out Tawny, and those of you who weren't, it's just an absolute pleasure to be associated with people like this. And as we said earlier too, even though it's taken Bill time, these things are happening. Studio's finished. I can prove it. It'll take me a second to prove it. Question mark. There it is. I still haven't done the walkthrough yet, the video walkthrough. I need to. Because I saw the video walkthrough, which we shot back in May. And the amazing thing about the video walkthrough is, back in May, all these walls were black and nothing was here. And I walked through the room and I said, we're going to put a big mural up over there, and we'll have pictures of this here, and we'll have this there. And sure enough, there it is. So it's pretty cool. So, so the studio's done. It might have taken Bill time to get done, but it got done. And time over target once a day for 3 weeks now. We got a really terrific editor named Dante, who's doing great work, and he's knocking them out the door, and I get to go home, which is lovely. So I'm very, very impressed with him as a really hard-working young man, and real hope for the future for me, just in general. Great guy. So they've been out there every day for 3 weeks now, and we're getting the speakeasies in the can. It's all been digitized. I'm going to cut that start next week. I'm going out of town for a couple days. I'll be back. And then, boom, then we make the move to feature films, and we knock these people off their perch because they're not going to know what hit them. American Sniper shows us the power of this monopoly they've had. So we're going to be the cultural Uber to the big Hollywood taxi service. We don't have to be everywhere. We just have to be in enough places to give people an alternative, and that's where we're going to go. So as to all of you out there saying goodnight, thanks. Good night to all of you. Couldn't have done it without you. For Strata Loungers and all of you who've been here since the beginning, thank you so much for the support and the kind words. And this experience, as I said, with Tawny is just makes me have to be a better person. It gets me out of bed in the daytime. Not just her courage, but your support and your kindness and generosity is astonishing. As always, this show's possible. The big orange and blue walls and the giant corn captain and Dave Bowman staring in wonder. It's all made possible by by you members of BillWhittle.com, and I know all of you Stratosphere fans out there would, if you're not one, I know you'd like to be one. I know times are tough out there, but we're actually delivering what we said we would, so maybe give it a second look if you'd like to. But if you don't, that's fine too. So that's the end of Stratosphere Lounge episode 88. We'll hopefully get 90 done next week. I'm only gone out of town for one night. 89 rather, and then 90. And by God, we're going to do something major for the 100th anniversary. I don't know what yet, but it's going to be pretty cool. So until then, thanks for everything. We're going to fade to the graphic and the logo, and we'll hit the save button, I think, this time. And that'll put this one in the can, and hopefully we'll see you next week. And thanks again for the support. Bye-bye. Where's the button? It must be that button around here somewhere. Oh, there it is.